Welcome to my second video, guys. So yeah, first off, I'd like to apologize for my not so impressive upload frequency. I mean, yeah, I only get to upload when I get some free time, so yeah, again, my apologies for that. But hopefully I'll be increasing my upload frequency to a couple of more videos. So yeah, today we're going to be upgrading my computer from a Core 2 quad system to a Ryzen 5 5600G system, which is from AMD. So basically I've switched from Intel to AMD, so yeah, let's get it started. Now for the motherboard, we're going to be using the GIGABYTE B550 MDS3H DDR4 motherboard with an AM4 socket. Now for the processor, I'm going to be using the AMD Ryzen 5 5600G with an integrated Vega 7 graphics and a base clock of 3.9 GHz. Yep, a whopping 3.9 GHz, and we can overclock that with a proper motherboard. So yeah, we're going to be doing that in the future. So yeah, drop a comment below if you would like me to make a dedicated video on overclocking the RAM, CPU, and maybe the integrated GPU as well, since we can do that now using the AMD Adrenalin software. So yeah, I'll be covering the cooling options as well in the next video. Now lifting the retention arm, we're gonna seat the CPU into the socket very carefully. Be sure to align the golden triangle on the CPU with the little triangle on the socket. Now it really shouldn't be hard, and after that we're just gonna clip it back and boom. And for the cooler, we're gonna be using the stock AMD Wraith Stealth cooler. So I'm planning to upgrade it in the future with a Deepcool AG400 LED cooler, but then for now, for basic purposes, I'm just gonna use this. I mean, it's good enough, so yeah, let's go with this. Now the first step to installing a cooler is to remove the stock brackets that come along with the motherboard. These coolers are actually for the AMD Anthlon, mainly for the Anthlon coolers, which just come in a clip-on system and don't have to be screwed in any way. So yeah, we're going to be removing this first. After removing these, we can just easily screw in the cooler and we're basically done with that. The only thing we would have left is to plug in the PWM controller. One more thing, since the cooler comes pre-applied with thermal paste, I would suggest you not put any additional thermal paste on the processor or on the cooler. Now be sure not to smudge the thermal paste off the cooler, since doing so will just result in overheating issues. Now after that, we're going to be tightening the cooler in a crisscross pattern, just to ensure there is even pressure on the CPU IHS, or the integrated heat spreader. Now when we do this, we have to be careful not to press in the cooler too much, or it might just crack the die from the inside of the IHS, resulting us in a dead processor, which would probably be like a really dreadful scenario. So yeah, just be sure to be careful and we should be good to go. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just lightly torquing the screws to ensure that it doesn't come back off loose in the future. So yeah, that's basically it. Now for the RAM, I'm going to be using an 8GB stick of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAM, which has a base clock of 2666 MHz but a maximum boost clock of 3200 MHz. Now in order to enable this boost, we're going to have to go to the BIOS, then enable the XMP 2.0 profile. So yeah, what we're going to do now is just slot in the RAM. Just be sure to align the notches and yeah, just slot it in and make sure that the clips clip on very nicely. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just connecting the PWM cable. This cable actually sends a PWM signal which allows us to regulate the fan speed using fan curves in the BIOS itself. It also gives power to the fan. On final inspection, we can see that everything seems good. So yeah, now we can move on to the next step, which comes to the power supply. Now for the power supply, I could have gone with the GIGABYTE B550D. However, since GIGABYTE has a really long history of its power supplies blowing up, this time I'm gonna go with the Deepcool PK550D. It has a 1-year warranty and actually has a good price. So yeah, it's a 550 watt power supply that is bronze rated. So yeah, in terms of efficiency, it will give a decent performance. It also has black cables and the plug comes with it. The power supply itself comes neatly packaged and the fan actually claims to be silent, but we'll see that in the performance test in the future. So yeah, it has flat back cables, so that's nice. Now for the case, I'm going to be going with the AMD eSports Elite 1100 gaming cabinet. It actually has a PSU shroud, and it's not a tempered glass side panel but actually an acrylic side panel. It's not a transparent acrylic side panel but rather a smoked acrylic side panel, which allows for decent visibility. And yeah, the good thing about acrylic is that it doesn't easily shatter, so yeah, I would highly recommend using an acrylic panel rather than a glass side panel, if it's just for aesthetic purposes, that is. Moving on, we also get 4 LED fans that come pre-attached to the case, so yeah, it's pretty much bang for your buck. And these are not ARGB LEDs but actually fixed RGB. Now with it, we also get the screws and the standoffs for the motherboard, so that's nice. Now since this good cabinet actually also comes with a PSU shroud, it will allow us to actually cable manage these cables to make everything look good. So now I'm just gonna untie these cables and slot in the PSU into the shroud. Now the screws already come with the power supply, so I'm gonna be using those. So I got this cabinet for 1800 rupees on sale, and I'm gonna be linking all of the different product links in the description. They are not affiliated links, so I won't be getting any compensation for advertising these components, but they are genuinely good, so I'm just gonna leave it in the description and you can go check it out for yourself. Now I'll be getting an RTX 2060 graphics card in the future for this PC, so stay tuned and I will be posting a video on that as well. It's actually a really good website, so yeah, we'll see. Now for storage, I'm going to be using my 240GB SSD, which is a Kingston A400 that I've salvaged from my old desktop. Since yeah, it's still good, so I'm going to be using that as my boot drive. Then I'll be upgrading the storage to maybe a 1TB NVMe SSD in the future. Now what I'm gonna do is connect these Molex connectors of the fans to the Molex connector on the power supply. Now the neat thing about these fans is that their Molex connectors can be daisy chained, which means that they can be attached to one another, which allows me to only use a single Molex connector from the power supply to connect all 4 of the fans. So yeah, that's a neat thing that saves you more space and more cables. Now I'm going to be routing the 8-pin power connector for the CPU from the top of the case, which would allow me to cleanly hide the cables, and you'll be seeing the end result, and I hope that you'll be impressed by that as well. Now screwing in the motherboard is actually a pretty simple process, so yeah, if you want to see that, you can just always visit my previous video in which I cleaned my previous computer, and you can learn another thing or two. Now what I'm going to be doing now is actually connect the I/O connectors onto the motherboard. Now I would strongly suggest you guys refer to your motherboard manual, since yeah, the I/O connectors vary from one motherboard to the other, so in order to avoid ambiguity as well as confusion, I would strongly suggest you do that. So yeah, for my I/O I actually have 2 USB-A ports and 1 USB 3.0 port. So for the USB 3.0 port, I'm going to be using the dedicated connector on the motherboard. Furthermore, we have the hard disk LEDs and the power and reset switches. Now finally, this is what your finished product should look like, along with the coolers, connectors, RAMs, fans and all. So yeah, I haven't done any cable management yet, but you'll be seeing that in a few moments. Now get ready for the cinematic shots, and let's go. So that pretty much wraps up this video, guys. I hope you found it enjoyable and a bit informative. So yeah, be sure to drop a sub and be sure to share this to someone who might find it helpful. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, goodbye.